Hello everyone, in this video I'm going to show you how you can use Ableton Live to control flexible backing tracks in a live worship team setting. Backing tracks are a great tool if you have maybe a smaller worship team but you still want that big sound from your band. And Ableton is a really great software that allows you to use backing tracks live and still keep a lot of flexibility and creativity and still keep it a musical process rather than just sort of pressing play on your backing track and off it goes and you lose all your control. So our worship team is fairly big, but sometimes we still have Sundays where we don't have the full band, but we still want to have that big full band sound every Sunday. So Ableton and backing tracks with Ableton Lives are a great way that we use so that we can have that same consistent full massive sound every Sunday, even maybe if we on one Sunday we don't have a bassist or we don't have a drummer. Using Ableton and backing tracks allows us to keep that consistent quality from one week to another. Ableton and backing tracks are also a great tool if you're maybe a small church or a worship team that's just getting started and you have a very small team but you still want consistent quality, you want a big sound, and it's a great way to get started that way even if you maybe have a smaller team. So in this video, I'm going to first show you how exactly I use Ableton to control the backing tracks live in a live setting. And then second, I'm going to show you how you can set up the live set and the backing tracks in a way so that you can do this for your own songs and that you can start using Ableton for backing tracks. Now I'm going to show you how you can use Ableton Live to control backing tracks while playing on stage with your worship team. So in Ableton you have these two view modes. You have the arrangement view and the session view, which you can change up here. And I like to use the session view to control backing tracks live. In this view you have this sort of matrix layout where you have the columns, and each column represents an instrument or a group of instruments. So here we have the drums, the guitars, the keyboards, all other instruments, and the bass, and then a guide which guides you through the backing track. And in the rows, you have the different sections of a song. So here we have the song Creation Sings, and we have the intro, the verse, the chorus, and so on of each song. Now, let me first talk about the rows and the instruments. In each of these rows you see here is actually a group. So I can open this up and then you can see in this drums group, I have several instruments that are each drums. So we have this main drums sound and then we also have some percussion. Or for the guitars, there's actually more than just one guitar that plays in this song, and so I have each guitar in here and then I put them together in these groups so that I can control all the guitars at once live. So for example, I can change the volume of all the guitars at once or take out all the guitars for a certain part of the song if that's what I want to do. And this way it's sort of still manageable in a live setting, because if I had each and every instrument at the same time open while playing live, then it would just be too much to control. But now I have these 5 groups that I need to control because I don't really need to do much to the guide, but these 5 instrument groups that I can control while playing live. In the columns I have the different instrument groups, and in the rows I have the different parts of the song. Each row in Ableton Live is called a scene, and the first scene for a song, I like to mark it in green, and this just tells me the name of the song, the key it's in. This is important so that I don't accidentally use the wrong key. Then it's also important that for each scene you specify the BPM of that song and the time signature. So whether you write 8/8 or 4/4 in here actually makes no difference. It just changes how the metronome will sound. But of course, if you have a song that's in 3/4 or in 6/8, then you have to specify that up here correctly for each scene. This first scene, if I launch this scene, this is just going to play that song from start to finish exactly as it would be in the recording or in the backing track.
Creation sings in 3, 4.
So this just sort of starts the song and plays it all the way to the end. And then I have another scene for each individual section of the song. So I have the intro, I have the first verse, the chorus, the second verse, the chorus again, and so on. Then we have the bridge, and each bridge has its own scene also. And what each of these scenes does is that it jumps to that part, to the beginning of that part of the song, and then it will just continue going through the rest of the song as it would in the recording. So this is not a loop, but it just jumps to that section and then just keeps going to the end of that song. So now, for example, if I want to start with the second chorus and then just play through the song until it finishes, I could just start the scene right here and then continue to the end of the song. This is really useful because it means that as long as we're sticking to the original sequence of the song, I can be fairly hands-off with the backing track. I don't have to do much the whole time. So I don't have to, once we're done with the verse, I don't have to activate the chorus, then activate the second verse and so on, and be busy controlling the track throughout the whole song. But it's really only when we deviate from the original sequence of the song that I can make these changes, and then I can be really flexible. So let's say that we've just played the first chorus, and usually now we would continue to the second verse, but the worship leader decides she wants to do the first chorus one more time. So then I would just launch this chorus 1 scene, and we would jump back into the beginning of chorus 1 with our backing track. We can sing the first chorus one more time, and then the track will just continue going through the usual sequence, so I don't have to do really anything else there. I can, of course, also jump ahead, skip the second verse if we don't want to do it at all, and then I can just jump to the scene for chorus 2, and so on. Another key feature that enables you to work with backing tracks live while you're performing is this option up here that you should set to 1 bar. And what that means is that whenever you launch a scene over here, this scene will only be launched on beat 1 of the next measure in your metronome count. So that means when I press this, let's say this verse 1 scene, it will only be triggered once the next measure in my metronome count starts. Let me demonstrate that. So I'll have the metronome going. The high-pitched beep marks beat 1, and now I will launch chorus 1, but it'll only launch on beat 1 of the next measure. And this means that whatever you launch will always stay in sync, in time to your metronome, and so as long as your band is also playing to the metronome, your track will match your band. In all of these groups, I have the audio stems of every single instrument that was in the recording for that song. And of course, in most cases, I don't want the full audio of that song to be played in the along with what my band is playing. And so I'll usually select on a week-to-week basis what I want to have in the backing track and what I want the band to play live for that week. So for example, if we have a drummer in our band for that week, I don't need the drums in the backing track. So I'll select the drums for that song, and then I will deactivate them. Deactivate clips, or you can also press the 0 key. They'll turn gray, and now they won't be played when I launch any of these scenes. I don't have a percussion player, so I'll keep the percussion in the backing track. You can also check, okay, do we have an acoustic guitar player? How many electric guitars do we have? Then I can deactivate those guitars that will be played live and leave those in the backing track that I want to be played by the backing track. Do the same thing for the keys. We have a piano player, so I'll take the piano out, but some of these pads maybe we can't play live, so I'll keep them in the track. Same for all these instruments. We unfortunately don't have an orchestra, so I'll keep the strings in the track, and the bass, depending on whether we have a live bass player or not. I'll leave the bass in the track, or I'll take it out by deactivating it. And this way I can decide what stays in the track and what is the band gonna play live, and make sure it always works together well. Finally, I want to quickly mention the output routing. So down here you can open the routing section in Ableton Live, which shows you where each of these tracks where the audio is going to, and right now everything is going to master, and then the master out over here is going to outputs 1 and 2. Right now I have my Focusrite Scarlett 2i2 audio interface connected, which you can see when you open your audio preferences, and then I set my audio output to the 2i2 interface. And then the important thing is that you don't want your backing tracks and your metronome and the guide to run on the same audio channels, because the metronome and the guide, obviously you only want yourself and your band to hear on your in-ear monitors, and the tracks should be audible outside, but to your congregation, to the people listening. But you don't want the metronome audible to the whole church. So what you need to do is set the cue out to one channel, maybe channel 1, and then also set your guide out to that same output. And now that audio will go out of the output channel 1 on my interface, and then I want to send the audio of all my tracks to the second channel, so that now these are separated, and I can only hear the metronome on the in-ears. If you connect a larger interface, then you can also have a stereo output for your backing tracks. This is something I would strongly recommend. If you can afford a larger interface, having your backing tracks in stereo will improve the sound by a whole lot. And if you want to connect an even larger interface that has maybe 8 or 10 outputs, then you can even send each of these instrument groups to a separate channel, and then send these to your mixer separately, so that your audio engineer can then adjust the volume of the individual instrument groups on the fly, and this will help your audio engineer to mix your whole sound even in a bit more of a flexible way, and it gives your audio engineer a bit more control there, which might make them happy. Next, I'm going to show you how you can get from having the individual audio stems of your backing track for a song to the finished set in Ableton Live, where you have all the scenes and all the instrument groups with all the instruments, so that you're ready to play live with your backing track. I'm going to go over 4 steps that you need to take to set up your track in this way. The first step you need to take is to write down the sequence of the entire song. For that, you can open the song in arrangement view. If you have bought your backing tracks from multitracks.com, which is a great platform for buying backing tracks, then you already get this Ableton template, which will open up like this, where you have all the individual wave stems for all the instruments in arrangement view. So this is just the time going from left to right, and you see all the individual parts of the song there. If you don't have this Ableton template ready, then you can just drag and drop all these wave stems into the arrangement view, and then it should look similar to this, and you can do the same thing nevertheless. So what you start out with is you just take some sort of text document where you can take your notes, and you label what the song is called. So this is the song Glorious Day. And importantly, you want to write down the BPM and the time signature of that song. Otherwise, you're not going to be able to match this up with your sequencing later. So this is in 110 BPM and in 4/4. So, and then I just basically write down each individual section of the song. The first thing we have is this vamp, which I'm just going to call intro, or I abbreviate this with I0, and then I write down which measure this starts in, so that would be measure number 3. Next is verse 1, which I abbreviate with V1. This starts in measure 7, and I'm just going to go through the entire song like this. So verse 2 starts in measure 19. Then we have the first chorus, chorus 1. This starts in measure 31, and so on, going through the entire song. This is what that should look like for the entire song. The next step is to create the master scene in your matrix layout template. So what I have here is a template that already contains the groups of all the audio tracks that I will use later, but there's nothing in it yet. So I'm going to start by naming the scene after the song, Glorious Day. And here I also want to enter the key. So this is the song in D major. So I'm gonna name it Glorious Day in D. Then, very important, also enter the BPM, that's 110, and the time signature is 4/4, so that's already in there. Next, I'm going to put all the audio stems where they belong in this setup. So I have all the audio stems for that track in here, and now I'm just gonna sort them into my groups. So I have the acoustic guitar here, so that goes into the guitars group. I have the bass goes into the bass group. Backing vocals, I'll put that in other. The click track you can put in the guide group, although I personally usually don't use the click track, but instead use the Ableton built-in metronome, so I would deactivate this click track, or you don't even need to put it in there if you don't want to use it. You can put it in as a backup if you want to. We have the drums and so on. I'm just going to go through all of these stems, all the instruments, and put them in the group where I want to have them. I've now sorted all the audio stems into the groups where they belong, and there are a few more things I need to do before this master scene is ready to go. The first thing is I'm going to select all of my stems and warp them, and it's important to warp them in the right tempo and time signature. So I'm already going to set this to 110 and then press warp, and then it's good to just double check that these are warped to 110 BPM. You can view that down here and also adjust it if it's not right, but now these are all warped to 100 BPM. So this is important for the jumping around in time that we want to do later. And so once you've done that, you also need to make sure that the output volume, so the loudness, is fairly constant for all your songs. You don't want one song to be much louder than another song. That's just going to sound awful when you're playing live. So a good point of reference is that for the loudest part of a song, you should get to around -6 decibels on your master output if you're sending all your audio stems to your master. And then you still have a bit of headroom for your loudest part. And so now I'm just gonna play this song, jump to the loudest part, and I can already see, okay, this is much too loud. So again, I'm gonna select all of my stems and then adjust the gain. So you might have to play around with this, but I'm going to set this to -10, and then make sure, go to the loudest part again, and then the peak should be somewhere at around -10. So now this is a good volume for that track. Once we have this master scene created and the volume set, and we've warped all the audio stems, the third step is to now create all the scenes for the individual parts of the song. To do that, I'm going to duplicate this master scene. You can duplicate by right-clicking and then selecting duplicate, or pressing Command D. And now this first duplicated scene, I'm going to abbreviate the name a little bit so we don't have all that text in there all the time. So just GD, Glorious Day. And also for all the sub scenes that are not the master scenes, I like to change the coloring so that it's always easy for me to see where a new song starts and I don't get lost in my live set. So again, I'm going to select all of these stems and then set the color to yellow. Now I can close all these again. And now I can duplicate this scene. So as often as I have scenes here, so I can count how many I have here and then duplicate to have that many scenes. I've written down 15 individual parts of the song here, so I'm going to duplicate this to have 15 scenes here in total. I already have one, so 14 more. I'm going to set each sub-scene to what I have written down previously over here. So this first scene should be the intro, so I'm going to name it I0 intro. And then I need to make sure that all of these audio stems actually start where the intro starts, so at measure 3. For that, I'm going to select all of the stems, and then I'm going to take this marker down here and move it back to -2. This can be a bit confusing, but when you move it back to -2, that means it starts at measure 3 over, so measure 3 for the song. So now I can double check, play the scene, check that it actually starts with the intro. Next scene is the verse, so I'm going to name it V1. Again, select all the scenes. Now this should start at measure 7, so I'm going to drag all of them back to -6. Next scene is verse 2, so the same procedure. Select all of them. Now verse 2 starts at measure 19, so I'm dragging them back to -18. And so on, and I'm going to go through until I have all of my scenes set. And once you have set up all your scenes, then the fourth and final step is to just do some color coding so that it's really easy to visually see where you are, where you need to click, where you need to go when you're doing this live. And the color scheme I like to use is to mark all the sub scenes in yellow, the master scene that indicates we have a new song in green, and then I also like to mark all the choruses in orange, so I sort of have these anchor points throughout the song, and it's always really easy to see where I want to jump just at a glance. And that's already it. Now you have the whole song set up and ready to go for a live performance. You can jump anywhere in the song, go back and forth, however you want to be flexible with that song. And of course, if you have several songs, you just add them in the order of the set list you want to play them. And there you have your live set. I recommend to connect a MIDI controller to your computer and to set up your MIDI controller so that you can move through the scenes and start a scene and maybe even control the volume of your instrument groups with that MIDI controller rather than using the mouse and keyboard on your computer, because that will just allow you to be a bit faster when you're doing this live and maybe make fewer mistakes. So that's something I would recommend. Let me know if you'd be interested in a video showing how to set up and use a MIDI controller in Ableton Live, or also maybe in a video that shows how to do some smooth transitions between the tracks. I hope this was useful, and I hope you have lots of fun using Ableton for backing tracks for live worship. See you soon.